Tonight on Top Story, Parliament, through a majority decision, gives the Electoral Commission green light to exclude the existing voters' ID card from the list of requirements for the mass registration exercise and upholds the use of the passport and Ghana card. Meanwhile, the minority has described the majority decision as a slight on the country's electoral process, insisting it will violate the integrity of any electoral process in the country.
It is not a vote we could win or easily win, but we are persuaded to stand by the Ghanaian public.
Tonight we get some reactions on this latest decision by Parliament. Also tonight, SEPA petitions President Akufo-Addo to trigger processes leading to the removal of Ghana's returning officer Jean Mensah 6 months to the country's general election. Her offense, breaching Article 286 of the Asset Declaration Laws of Ghana.
Article 286 puts timelines on asset declaration. It doesn't say that you should wait and sit down for somebody files a petition before you rush to go and declare. No, Article 286 says 3 months before the assumption of office, and it must be done within every 4-year tenure.
That and more here on Top Story, brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Gasm, the nation builder, and Vodafone. The future is exciting, ready. Know that there's no way you run out of things to do during this period, because Vodafone has got you sorted with too much data. Now double the data at the same price. So whether you're taking an existing masterclass or binge watching Netflix series or bringing the party to Zoom, you now get too much data for the day and too much bonus from midnight till 4 a.m. All you need to do is to dial *700# to get 3 GB data for 10 Ghana cedis, 8 GB data for 20 Ghana cedis, and 20 GB data for 50 Ghana cedis bundle. Do stay for details here on Top Story. Now, in spite of massive resistance by the minority in Parliament to block the Electoral Commission's constitutional instrument 126, which will guide the conduct of the December polls, the House, through a majority decision, has approved and adopted the report of the Subsidiary and Legislative Committee. Now, the new CI makes Ghana card and passport only eligible source documents to register for new voters' ID card. Now, today in Parliament, both the majority and minority argued on their position, but it appears the majority used their numbers to push through with a CI. We'll listen to the Speaker of the House, Aaron Michael Quay, announcing the results of the vote after a heated argument between the two sides, obviously. Of course, that didn't end on the floor of Parliament. They went outside Parliament also and held separate press conferences on the matter. My colleague Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is in Parliament. He's monitored the entire proceedings. He joins us on the phone live with details. So let's start off with the minority leader's position. He's been reacting to the approval. What exactly are the concerns?
He makes the point that the new provisions in the constitutional instrument that has been approved, TI 126, a lot of Ghanaians will be disenfranchised going forward. He says that it poses a danger to the nation's democracy. He makes a case that with the new CI, there are millions of people, and that him as minority leader, he doesn't understand how come just because there are concerns about 50,000 people on the register, with the argument that has been made by the majority that with the Abu Ramadan court ruling at the Supreme Court, NHIS cards and driver's license should not be source documents. He doesn't understand how come a register with about 14 million people should actually be seen as not credible, because there are concerns about 50,000 people on the register. He makes the point that they, the minority, wanted to let it go on record that they are against this new CI. And he goes on to say that going into the future, those who pushed for this particular CI will be held accountable, and that they want it to be on record that they, the minority, did not support the effort in order to get the CI passed.
Going forward and into the future, we'll appreciate the principled positions we have taken as a political opposition and political minority, wary of our numbers. It is not a vote we could win or easily win, but we are persuaded to stand by the Ghanaian public. whose right to vote remains entrenched and guaranteed under the 1992 Constitution. We cannot fathom, nor appreciate or understand the desperation of President Nana Addo Dankwa and the incompetence of the Electoral Commission to want to compel Ghanaians to only two primary documents, a passport and a national identity card issued by the National Identification Authority. As many of you are aware, we are aware of foreign ministers past and present who have publicly spoken to the fact that there are Ghanaian passports in wrong hands and in the hands of foreigners. Indeed, much more recently, there was a conviction abroad of a Nigerian who was holding onto a Ghanaian passport. The national ID card so issued, not many have even gotten access to their cards. And an entitled right, you are now being told that somebody must vouch for you as a citizen. These are interesting times for Ghana. She did not even appear before the subsidiary legislation committee. Let history be our judge. You saw even the attitude when the chairman of the committee wants to correct even his report. He is in denial. Tomorrow we will see how reports will be corrected on the floor. When the chairman of the committee wants to make closing remarks, he is in denial. We will defend our democracy. And let it be reported that this is the contribution of the NDC minority to the protection of Ghana's nascent democracy and its electoral processes. And what has happened today violates the integrity of any electoral process and therefore its outcome.
Well, and that's the minority leader, Haruna Idrisu. Thankfully, he joins us on the phone. Thank you very much for your time, sir. But I'll quickly wrap up with our reporter, Joseph Opoku Gakpo. Joseph, quite a heated debate it was today. What exactly were the majority's argument to back its decision?
A number of points. According to the majority leader, Chairman Sabonsu, the minority has been shifting the goalpost in terms of why they are against the voters register. He goes on, why they are against the new CI. He says that the minority actually supported the idea of compiling a new voters register and even insisted that the money that was being given to the Electoral Commission was not enough. So he doesn't understand why they are backing off on that position now. And the majority leader again claimed that there's been arguments that because of COVID-19, then the new registration should not go ahead. He says that means even the election shouldn't come off. And for him, this is in the best interest of the country to have this new CI so that the Electoral Commission can start on a clean slate as far as who is on the voters register is concerned.
That's my colleague Joseph Opoku Gakpo. He's our parliamentary correspondent. And like I said, I have the minority leader Haruna Idrisu joining us here on Top Story. We're grateful for your time, sir. So I listened to you carefully. Two profound statements you made today. First, on the floor, you said the new CI will spell doom for the country's democracy. Then at the press conference, you insisted that this single act today will violate the integrity of any electoral process in this country. How so?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We insisted, even though not oblivious of the fact that we are a minority of 106 elected members, just for the record and for posterity, that we, the NDC members of Parliament, will stand any day, any time for the actualization of the realization of the principles and tenets of Article 42 of the 1992 Constitution, which recognizes that any citizen of Ghana 18 years and above is entitled to register for purpose of voting, and you can add to be voted for. That word entitlement does not mean somebody must come and vouch for you as to whether you are a citizen or not a citizen. Indeed, I look forward to a Ghana, and this is not the first time I'm making this comment, that any Ghanaian who attains age 18 can freely and warmly and courageously walk to any office of the Electoral Commission to register for the purpose of voting. As I understand the two legislations, the Electoral Commission Act, pursuant to Article 45, and the National Identification Authority Act pursuant to the act which created it. The two institutions are distinct and separate. For purpose of election, we know and we recognize the Electoral Commission. The same Electoral Commission referred to the report of the Parliamentary Committee on Special Budget 2020, insisted that they were not going to rely on the data of the National Identification Authority. What has changed? The National Identification Authority tells us today that only 10 million Ghanaians probably are on the ID card. Where are the cards? Have they been distributed? Have they been activated? With the voter population anticipated to be 18 million. What will happen to the 18 million other Ghanaians who are not on the National Identification Authority data list? They are simply prescribing the use of a driver license and the old voter ID card. That is not good enough. For a credible voter register guarantees the integrity of the electoral process and the outcome of the elections. We saw what happened even as the National Identification Authority undertook their exercise. I do not think that any Ghanaian want to be subjected to that ridicule and that embarrassing moments we saw when you have to queue for two people to come and say that we invite that you are a citizen. I've heard very, very interesting but lame arguments that birth certificate has never been a requirement. Must we expressly state birth certificate when it is stated in law that prove that you are a citizen? Let any lawyer of any standing demonstrate to me what you can use other than a birth certificate when they say be a citizen. How do you establish that you are a citizen of Ghana? By way of only Ghanaian passport? How many Ghanaians have passport? Less than 2 million Ghanaians. So is Ghana's population 2 million passport holders? I'm surprised at the desperation of President Nana Addo Dankwa and the New Patriotic Party. You want to have a credible voter register? Let's work towards an authentication and validation of what exists in addition to a limited voter registration exercise. That will make it. If you argue that we are saying that no voter register, therefore there should be no election, I mean, that's a trickle.
Well, you mentioned the word desperation, and I have a word that comes to mind readily is despair, because it looks like you're a man in despair at this point. You may have lost the battle in Parliament when it comes to this issue, but there are other avenues open, especially also in court. We know there's a case pending now. Why then are you so much in despair on this particular issue?
So I knew I would lose. Therefore, it was to be anticipated. We are watching closely what the Supreme Court will rule on this matter. Significant to their earlier ruling in the Abu Ramadan case that we made reference to. But it's only in Ghana that I hear statistical arguments that 56,000 doubtful voters can render 14.7 million voter data register redundant. It's only in Ghana. Statistically, that represents 0.35%. Statistically. So are you saying, how did Nana Addo Dankwa emerge as president? Must we question his legitimacy? How did Haruna Idrisu get elected as member of parliament? Must my legitimacy be questioned? What we are simply trying to do in discarding the old voter ID card is to raise legitimacy questions for the elected people of this country. And I worry. We are not looking for judgment or vindication today. Mm-hmm. Let the Electoral Commission undertake a process. If there is any chaos, if there is any undermine to our electoral integrity and this process, if there is any undermine to the peace and stability of this country, because we cannot resolve collectively and build consensus on a register, we know those who are responsible to it.
Well, could there have been a compromise position in all this from your perspective? Could a middle ground have been found that both sides would have supported?
My view would have been that the Electoral Commission should withdraw this CI and they take a limited voter register and authenticate the existing register for all other persons. That would be my way thinking forward into the future. And then they dismiss my argument on facial minutiae. You can research further. The way you take people's data relative to their facial recognition is not the same thing as biometric data. I stand by it. But speak to other IT experts and let's see what their elucidation would be.
You're still speaking about your middle ground. So I was asking for a middle ground that both sides would have agreed. Did you ever agree on anything at all, both sides?
I don't know what the both sides is thinking. I'm simply saying that a credible voter register is an imperative. We need a register. We have an existing voter register subjected to some process of authentication and validation and undertake a limited voter register as is required. But this instrument that prescribes the existing voter register, prescribes a driver license. Then why do you ask Ghanaians to go for driving license? Is that not a source of identity? I have repeatedly in the last 10 years argued on the floor of Parliament. You can synchronize the data from the National Communications Authority. You can synchronize the data from the National Health Insurance, the GVLA, the NIA, and the Electoral Commission into a simple Ghanaian National Data Registry. Thank you.
Well, the majority leader constantly said today on the floor, for instance, that your side, you're just shifting the goalposts because you supported the EC's budget.
Not
including
at
request
all.
for money. Mm-hmm.
Not at all. You can ask the majority leader. The EC came for budgetary support 2017-2018 to fix their data system. They never spend the money to do it. That's why the data system suffered when they did the limited registration. The EC couldn't spend 202 million of their budget and ask that it's been ring-fenced for them. Even in 2019, the EC couldn't spend 404 million of their budget and ask the Minister of Finance to ring-fence it for them. How then can you argue that we are shifting the goalposts? In any case, we have asked the Electoral Commission to come and share with us where they are. They have declined. We can't be disrespected. But we are all here. We are all in it. But this is our contribution to safeguarding Ghana's democracy.
Now, finally, before I let you off, sir, what next for the minority? Because Mama Yariga, for instance, has said he will go to court over the exclusion of the birth certificate. And we know that the old voters card exclusion is before the Supreme Court. Any expectations particularly?
I rather will await the Supreme Court decision on the matter pending before them. But there are several other options open to us as a party and as a caucus and as a group. But what is important is safeguarding Ghana's democracy and ensuring its integrity and ensuring that there is a credible register for the purpose of the 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections.
You didn't talk about the options available.
I shared one with you if you were mindful to take note of it. God bless.
That's the minority leader, Haruna Idrisu. They're joining us on the phone. The majority leader, Elseche Bensabunsu, has also joined us. We are grateful for your time. So the minority argues that this new CI will disenfranchise a lot of Ghanaians and make it impossible for them to get on the voters' register. Do you agree?
What evidence have they led to that? What evidence?
They talk about guaranteeing, for instance, and that it will disadvantage a certain group of people in favor of another, for instance.
Which group? Which group of people is it going to disadvantage?
You agree or disagree, sir?
Which group? A person makes a blanket statement. You should ask, how is it going to, happen? Is it applicable to a section of Ghanaians, this law? It's applying to all Ghanaians. So if I'm born in Wa, if I'm born in Kumasi, if I'm born at Azim, if I'm born at Elubo or Aflao, to the extent that I'm a Ghanaian, I cannot be disenfranchised by this law. So what is the basis of that statement that they are making? Don't forget, in December when the Electoral Commission came to Parliament to put their case before us that they wanted to do this, the minority leader's position was that, we are not disagreeing with the new register, but the allocation of money to you to do this would not suffice. Go and read the Hansard. That was his position. That was the position of the minority. And today, they are shifting from that position to say that some people are going to be disenfranchised. How is it going to be possible? They are not showing, they are not indicating to anybody what is going to result in that, except just making such blanket statement, which I think cannot be substantiated in any manner. So I disagree with that statement in the first place, that it's going to disenfranchise sections of Ghanaians. Which sections of Ghanaians is the law meant to disenfranchise? The Electoral Commission, when they appeared before the Subsidiary Legislation Committee, when they were asked of this, they said vouching for Ghanaians is not a new thing, that they have been doing that. And indeed, in the last limited registration that they did, in the lead up to the creation of the regions, about 95% of the people who turned out to be registered had to be vouched for by fellow Ghanaians. So it's a trend. Then they refer to a birth certificate that is missing from the identification cards. And so they think that is a grievous sin. But in all the CIs that have regulated registration of voters in this country since 1992, birth certificate has never been part of any. Birth certificate has never been part of any single CI that came to regulate any election in this country. So why now? Why are they raising this issue now? 2016, the CI that regulated our elections had no such thing. 2012, go back to 1995, go back to 1992. Birth certificate has never been an attestation of one's Ghanaian citizenship. So it's never been part of it. So why now are they raising hell because birth certificate is not part of it? So I don't see, they keep shifting the goalposts because, as they say, a drowning man will catch a straw. Other than that, I don't see the essence in this whole business.
Well, Mr. Majority Leader, one other concern that came up is about being mindful of a pending case in the Supreme Court over part of this matter. For instance, some are of the view that we could have held on till we get the outcome of that case, then we could have done what we did today. Is that not so? Is that the case?
That really is not the case.
Mm.
If a matter is referred to the Subsidiary Legislation Committee, and the committee does not come out with any report, and the instrument is laid and spends 21 sitting days in Parliament, to the extent that it is not annulled, it becomes operational. So whether or not we said anything about this today, the law would have, by the close of day today, become operational. The remit of the Subsidiary Legislation Committee is defined by our own rules, Order 166. The first thing that the committee will have to look at is whether or not the instrument that has been made in Parliament is in accord with the Constitution, and whether or not the instrument contains any matter which could be better be dealt with in a substantive act of Parliament. These things are determined, whether it imposes taxes and so on and so forth. The Subsidiary Legislation Committee, chaired by Dr. Dominic Ayine, elected to go out of this, the remit of the Subsidiary Legislation Committee, and engage in other matters. And they were talking about the inclusion of a particular identification card and so on and so forth. That certainly had nothing to do with the Subsidiary Legislation Committee. You don't determine what should go into what. It is the determination is on whether or not it is constitutional, whether it breaches any law, and so on and so forth. That is your remit. But he elected to go because, of course, he's in charge of a case that is before the Supreme Court. Perhaps he wanted to test his own strength in Parliament. And yet, at the end of it, it came to nothing.
We're grateful for your time. That's the Majority Leader, Osei Mensah-Bonsu. So let's quickly bring in Lawyer Samson Ayenene. I have a question, a legal question that I need education on. It's safe to say that Parliament has closed all avenues on this matter, but I'm wondering what happens to a case on the matter at the Apex Court as we speak.
So by the operation of Article 11, Clause 7 of the Constitution of Ghana, like the majority leader said, by close of day, this is the law in the country now as far as the registration of voters is concerned. You cannot produce and use or want to rely on the voter's ID card, which is the existing one, which by operation of this law will phase out by, I think, supposing by 6 o'clock, is it? Yeah, so it's gone. Now the court has invited the Electoral Commission to provide legal justification why it is excluding the current voter's ID card as a primary, document or source for the registration. On the basis of that, you might have a judge-made law. Parliament may have finished making their law. On the basis of that, you might have judge-made law that includes the voter's ID card as part of the identifiers. So there may not be a need for a fresh suit to be mounted to challenge the CI as it matures. On the basis of what is happening, the Supreme Court could give its blessing to the CI now by saying that they agree with the Electoral Commission that it ought to exclude it. But once it disagrees with them, it is able by its own power to make a law that now brings it as an addition to the passport and the national ID.
I'm very grateful for that education. Then that's lawyer Samson Ladi Anyenini there giving us the details here on Top Story. That's it. It's brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Gasm, the nation builder, and Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready. News Night starts in a bit.